Yo, what's good? It's your boy Dot from Dot Me Now Coaching and Entertainment for coaching. My links are down below. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the metaphysical science behind incarnation and reincarnation. If that sounds good to you, maybe you could just, like this video, subscribe if you're new, and if you see the option, maybe you could also hype up this video for your boy. It helps a lot. Let's get the message out there and let's get right into today's video. So, you already know, for a video like this, we got to bring up the chart, right? The body, soul, spirit. Let me get a bit bigger, you know? I'll keep it like that because I want to be able to actually put my finger up there. You know what I'm saying? Because once we get up here, I get cut off. So we going to, this is pretty good. All right. So when it comes to incarnation, right, we're going to get right. My bad. My throat's a little bit messed up right now. So if my talking or my voice kind of just goes out, that's the reason why. I got some tea right here, you know? Anyway, let's get right into the video. So incarnation begins with the eternal spirit, right? Which is up here. Your eternal spirit exists at this level. Then it forms an architectural spirit. Then it forms a soul. Then that soul forms a mind and an ego. And then you have the emotions, the energy body, and the senses. Then you have the actual physical body, right? Now, on the level of the eternal spirit. So at first, the eternal spirit has a desire to incarnate. So here's what you must understand about the eternal spirit. You see, the eternal spirit exists inside of its own realm. And when the eternal spirit wants to have an experience separate from its realm, it incarnates as a soul. Now, the soul is technically still immortal, but it can now separate from its own realm. Think about it like this. Your spirit has its own kingdom, right? That would mean that your spirit is the king or the queen if you're a girl. Now, with that being said, if there's no king or queen to rule the kingdom, who's going to rule it? You see what I'm trying to say? So the spirit stays inside of its own kingdom. Meanwhile, it sends different aspects of the kingdom, different people in the kingdom, different aspects of itself to go experience things outside the kingdom and then bring it back to the kingdom. So I'm going to talk a bit more about that. Understand that your eternal spirit can experience other realms on their own, or they can experience other realms besides their own realm. But when they do it, they essentially take their realm with them. So it's like if you're a king and you want to go to another kingdom, you have to bring your whole entire kingdom with you. You know? It's kind of like that. But if you want to get separate from your kingdom, you need to form a soul and send it out there. So as an eternal spirit, you exist beyond time and space. When you become a soul, you can now experience different spaces outside of yourself or incarnate into a space-time construct. Now, there are certain spaces that exist outside of time. That's why I said it like that. Your spirit exists outside of space and time, right? It exists kind of inside of its own space, you could say. If you want to experience other spaces, which are still outside of time, you must do that with a soul. But you can also incarnate into different space-time constructs, which include space and time. You see? So, with the spirit existing beyond time and space, that means that the spirit is one with its own space. It's one with its own realm. The spirit and its realm are essentially one and the same, rather than being able to walk inside of its realm. The spirit essentially is its realm and exists as its own kingdom. So what I'm trying to say is, right, your spirit and the kingdom of your spirit are essentially one thing. That's why wherever your spirit goes, the kingdom comes with it. Even when it comes like a kingdom on earth, a lot of kings or queens see themselves as being one with the kingdom. Okay, so it's all unified. It's not like the spirit walks inside of its kingdom. It literally is the kingdom. But the spirit can form souls that kind of exist within inside of its own kingdom, and they do things within inside of the kingdom. I'll be getting to that in a little bit. So when becoming a soul, right? A soul can experience different aspects of the spirit's realm or kingdom as being separate from it, and it can begin to form its own provinces or dimensional spaces within inside of the kingdom of the spirit, aka the realm of the spirit, right? So your spirit's like a galaxy, right? Your spirit's the galaxy itself, and then your soul is like different stars inside the galaxy, which create their own experiences within inside of the galaxy. Now, the soul can also visit other dimensional spaces outside of its kingdom or even incarnate into a space time construct. This will allow the soul to experience time and a sense of mortality, right? Life and death. Because now that you have time, there's a beginning and an end. Now you can actually experience death, right? Now, when an eternal spirit wants to add to its kingdom, it will split off into a soul aspect in order to gain experiences outside of itself, so that way it can add those experiences outside of itself into its own kingdom. When a soul gets experience and brings it back to the eternal spirit, that soul aspect becomes immortalized and can make its own province. And this province is formed based upon the experience of that soul aspect. I already made a video about immortalizing the soul. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. But what I'm saying is, right, once again, your spirit can't leave its kingdom. If it wants an experience outside of itself, it has to form a soul, then send it outside the kingdom. And then once that soul experiences that thing, it brings the information back to the kingdom. And now the spirit adds that experience to its kingdom. And now it has that kingdom. So I'll give a good example. Let's say that your spirit knows nothing about dragons, right? Okay, cool. Let's say that you're like an actual kingdom on earth, right? And you can see dragons like in other kingdoms, and you can even learn everything that there is to know about them. But you don't know what it's like until you experience it for yourself. Because of this, if you're like a king or a queen, you send one of your people to go experience the dragon stuff for themselves, and then since that person has the experience, once they get done experiencing all the dragon stuff, they bring it back to you, the king or the queen, and they say, hey, here's what I experienced. So that's what your soul does, right? Although you can access all information, it's different once you experience it. So when the spirit splits off into a soul and the soul lives out that life, it gets the true knowing from experience and then brings it back to the spirit. And now that aspect of creation now gets added to the greater kingdom. So when the eternal spirit decides he wants to incarnate somewhere, the eternal spirit forms into an architectural spirit, and that architectural spirit forms a soul template. Well, it forms a soul and a template for the incarnation of that soul. So when incarnating out of time, the soul still remembers its eternal origins and its connection to its eternal spirit and its kingdom, aka realm. Now, when the soul incarnates into time, the soul forgets more and more about its eternal nature and its home. So, pretty much, going to a other space outside of time, you still have a sense of immortality because there's no beginning or end. When you go into time, though, you automatically begin to forget your eternal nature since now you are subject to time. Now you're subject to having to actually grow and then die. When there's no time, you kind of just exist as you are. When there's time, there's now like a process of being birthed, growing up, and then dying, right? So you forget more about that eternal nature. And the denser the construct gets, or the further away that space time gets from your spirit, the more and more you tend to forget, right? The more limitations placed on you, you forget your unlimited nature, and time itself is a limitation. You see? All right, so we just talked about the eternal spirit up here, right? Now let's talk about the soul template down here. So your soul template contains your life purpose or life purposes, aka your reason for incarnating, right? Your reason or different reasons. The soul template also contains different timelines which one can and or will experience. So there's certain timelines which you're just gonna experience, right? There's certain points of time, certain checkpoints which is just gonna happen. There's other timelines which are kind of inside your soul template, but may not always manifest depending on what choices you make inside of your life. You also have your inherent guidance, right? Now, these could be called like spirit guides, but it's not the same as like spirit guides that are like separate entities. Because some spirit guides that you have are literally separate beings from you. But inside your template, you have this inherent guidance, which is going to naturally guide you with inside of your life. It pretty much guides you to help you fulfill your reason for incarnating. It will help you. It will help you through certain timelines and stuff like that. And on this level is where you start making those soul. I'd even because I have a script in front of me, so I don't like lose track of what I'm talking about. But I forgot to add that your different soul contracts, they're inside of here also. So the contracts that you, because there's contracts that you have with people that you incarnate with, and there's also contracts which you have with people who are outside of wherever you're incarnating. That's where you get your other spirit guides that are literally actual beings that you made a contract with to guide you while you're on earth in a certain phase of your life. So you have your inherent spirit guides. I'll just say you have your inner guidance and your outer guidance. You have the inner guides inside of yourself, which are parts of you, and you have guidance outside yourself, which are actual beings, right? So soul contracts are also contained inside the soul template. You see? That's a fact. That's why if you tap into your soul template, you'll understand more about different agreements that you made with certain people. And you'll see that a lot of stuff that you went through was an agreement, but also there's some things that you might have went through with a certain person that was never inside your soul contract to begin with. But I do want to say this. Since your architectural spirit exists outside of time and space, as you live your life, right, you might encounter situations which were never inside your soul template. But because you want to experience them while being on earth, your architectural spirit can whip up a quick timeline and whip up a quick contract. So even though you can say that your timelines and soul contracts and you can say that all these things are kind of already made, but since all time's happening at once, it's technically still being made right now. You might encounter certain things which makes your architectural spirit make a new soul contract with somebody else, right? You might start dating a person which was never in your plan to date. But now you and this person form a soul contract outside of space and time, because the same way that you have an architectural spirit, that other person does also. And somehow you guys came together, and on the top level, your spirits may agree to make a contract between you two. Now you guys have a contract. So I'm glad that just came to mind. That's not on my little like that's not on my notes. You know what I'm saying? But that's important. The soul contract aspect, and the fact that even though things seem like they're already planned out, the plan's still being made based upon what you decide to do inside of your life. But even when that plan gets made, like let's say that I do something right now and then something else gets added to that plan, even when that thing gets added to my plan, it's kind of like it was always going to happen that way anyway. So that's why time can get weird. It's like if you see it as beginning, middle, and end, it's gonna trip you up. But even when it all happen, because it's not beginning, middle, end. Certain stuff is being made right now. You know what I'm saying? But even the stuff that's being made right now is kind of like on some higher level that it was already gonna happen anyway. That might be a bit confusing to understand, but it's not overly important. Just understand the fact that new contracts can be made, new timelines can be made, but even if those new contracts and timelines get made, there was a certain way that it was already gonna happen that way anyway. So yeah, there's a little time paradox for y'all, you know. But yeah, the last thing I would say what your soul template holds is the different soul aspects which you bring inside of this life. Now, real quick, before I explain soul aspects, I want to say that there might be certain things which I could have left out with the soul template, but as of right now, I think I got everything. Your reason for incarnating, the different timelines, your inherent guidance system, soul contracts, and soul aspects. So, soul aspects are aspects of your spirit which have become incarnated souls and develop their own ego and develop their own egos, hold their own records and their own samskaras, which is pretty much your karma. So your samskaras are karmic tendencies and past mental, energetic, and emotional impressions. You know what I'm saying? I made a video about nullifying your karma, or about clearing karmic cycles or something like that, where I explain karma inside that video. And I also have a video about the ego. So if you don't understand what the ego truly is, go watch that video. But with the karmic stuff, right? So pretty much when you do certain actions, it gets ingrained inside of you on some level. That's called a samskara, right? It's a karmic impression, right? It's a memory of something which you did in the past, which can now influence you again if you feed energy to that thing. So yeah, that's what a soul aspect is. It's an aspect of your spirit that became a soul and developed their own ego. They have their own records of experience and they contain different samskaras. Now the spirit can choose to include no soul aspects, or it could choose to include specific aspects and specific records and samskaras from those soul aspects, or it could include all the records and all the samskaras. So understand that when no soul aspects are included, the soul becomes a naked awareness that only has its purpose, its timelines, its soul contracts, its guides, which become the basis for the ego which it forms while incarnated. Now, when different soul aspects are added, this begins to influence what karmas and what cycles you're going to experience on earth, based or wherever you're at, is going to determine what you're going to experience while you're in that incarnation. I'll just say earth for right now because we're on earth right now, right? So if different soul aspects get added, right, like I said, it's going to influence the different karmic cycles which you experience, and it's going to also influence your inherent personality and ego. Because the way that your ego forms, right, is partially based upon how you've been in past lives, right? But if certain past lives, if certain soul aspects are not added to your template, then you're a bit more of a naked awareness that kind of just forms a personality based upon certain soul contracts, based upon your reason for incarnation, based upon certain timelines, so on and so forth, right? Now, of course, the outside world also affects how you form an ego and stuff, but aside from the ego, those are the things that influence your ego. Or my fault. Aside from the outside world, the things I just stated is what's going to affect the creation of your ego, unless you have soul aspects, which also affect that creation of your ego. Okay, cool. So now that we covered the sixth part, let's get to the five, right? That's where you have the soul. So your soul is pretty much a programmed awareness which incarnates, right? Now, let's talk about reincarnation. Okay, because like I said, you got the eternal spirit who desires it, the architectural spirit that makes the template, and the template has all those different things. Then you have the actual soul that incarnates into lower realities, right? Now, when it comes to reincarnation, after the soul dies, right, it's gonna go through a couple of things, you know what I'm saying? But at some point, it's gonna end up inside the spiritual plane, right? It ends up, because when I talk about spirit, soul, and body, these relate to inner planes. So, like with inside of yourself, your soul is on the fifth inner plane, right? But there's also outer planes, like outer planes of reality. So the five is what we could call the spiritual plane. It's the first plane that's of the spirit. Since your soul is of the spirit, this is where souls all exist at, right? They exist inside the fifth plane. So when a soul first dies, they'll be inside the astral and stuff like that. They'll be going through all this different shit until they get back to the spiritual plane. Now, once a soul goes back to the spiritual plane, it has two options. It can either reincarnate as the same soul, or it could become one with the spirit again and exist inside their own province. That's like, and I mean, there's likely other things like I could say, but we'll just keep it at those two basic levels, right? So let's talk about when a soul decides to incarnate as the same soul. And what I mean is the fact that your eternal spirit, right? See, everybody's eternal spirit is different. Some people's eternal spirit chooses to make multiple soul aspects. Some other person's eternal spirit might just make one soul aspect, which it constantly uses to incarnate into different areas. Now, at some point, the that soul does have to return to the eternal spirit, but once that soul returns, the eternal spirit could just send it out somewhere else. It just uses the same exact soul every single time. Some eternal spirits do that. That's how you get certain souls that might have a mass amount of information. Granted, as a soul, once you kind of understand your soul template and kind of go beyond your soul template, you can easily reconnect with your spirit, and then you can choose to pretty much download all the wisdom from every single soul which is contained inside your eternal spirit. So that's another way that souls can become very freaking smart. You can either be a soul that has been the same soul through all your incarnations, or if you're a different soul from other incarnations, you can still choose to connect with your spirit and then download all those aspects of yourself once again. Because inside your template, you already have certain soul aspects. But once you download all of those soul aspects, you could go on to soul aspects that weren't even inside your template in the first place. I'm gonna make a video about the unique nature of one spirit. It's gonna talk about how spirits could be a bit different when it comes to creating certain souls, but we'll say that for another time. Let's talk about why a soul would reincarnate as the same soul. So it happens for one of two reasons. It could also be both of these. So number one, right? The soul may feel like it didn't fulfill its purpose, or it didn't fulfill its reason for coming to earth, or it didn't get the experience that it wanted, right? I'm putting that all as one, because the soul doesn't pretty much the soul doesn't feel fulfilled with the experiences which it had. Number two, the soul could simply just want new experiences. Even if the soul feels fulfilled with what it experienced while being incarnated, it might have saw other things which the soul was like, yo, I wonder if I could have tried that. You see? So pretty much the soul can begin wanting experiences which were not in its template if it gets too attached to physical, or I won't say too attached, if it gets attached to physical experiences which the eternal spirit doesn't/didn't inherently care about nor originally desired to experience, right? So that's how that happens. It could also be both. The soul can feel unfulfilled with its current experience and also want new ones as well. So these are reasons which the soul will decide to reincarnate, right? Now, at this stage, the architectural spirit begins adding to the original template. So inside their template, they still have all the original stuff, but now they're adding to it. Mainly, they're going to add new timelines. They're gonna add the new reason for incarnating. That it's still gonna be mixed with the old one, but the new one's gonna be there too. Um, they're gonna have like maybe a slightly different inherent guidance, mainly because there's gonna be new guidance for the new reason for incarnating and navigating new timelines, which the soul might experience while being incarnated. New soul contracts might get formed, etc., etc., etc. That's how you also get souls who sometimes get trapped inside of this physical experience because they keep on deciding to incarnate, whether it's because they're attached to certain experiences that they see on earth which their spirit didn't even care about, but now they care about it, or it could be that they never feel fulfilled, whether it's because they kind of just forgot who they were, or there were certain other forces that pretty much threw them off track. Whatever it is, this is why souls can constantly reincarnate and kind of forget their divine nature. Now, reincarnating isn't bad at all. It's just that the different reasons why a person does it can make them forget more and more of who they truly are, especially if they're only doing it because they're attached to the physical and stuff like that. And That's a whole thing. But yeah, the soul can't choose to reincarnate on its own, on its own, right? Because once your spirit forms a soul aspect, that soul has its own intelligence and will. Granted, though, I'm pretty sure that the spirit could at one point just say, "Nigga, fuck that. You're gonna get added to me." I'm sure that's possible, but I'm just speaking in a way that's gonna help y'all understand, right? Because the spirit can do a lot of different things. Which, if I talk about that, that might throw off the course of this video. So to keep it simple, the soul can choose to reincarnate, right? And then once it does that, the template gets changed, new soul contracts, new timelines, a different inner guidance, maybe even different outer guides, right? Because the different soul contracts which form, the different soul contracts which form can be with people inside the incarnation, but also people outside of it, right? But anyway, now let's talk about what happens when the soul becomes one with the spirit. So at this point, right, the soul becomes immortalized and it exists within the kingdom of the spirit with its own province that contains records from their incarnation or several incarnations. The soul will live in this province until the spirit either decides to reincarnate this soul into a new experience, which the spirit sees that soul fit, or it will add that soul aspect to a template for a new soul where some or all of that soul's aspects experience may help with this new soul aspect. When the spirit adds that soul aspect to a new template, it can choose what records and what samskaras, aka karmas, from this soul aspect that the new soul is going to inherit, right? So, yeah, that's kind of how that works. That's how incarnation and reincarnation works, right? Once the soul is done reincarnating, it kind of just goes back to the spirit. Now, granted, some parts of the soul may kind of get my fault. I just got a text from my cousin. My bad. Anyway, certain parts of certain information from the soul may kind of get cut off. What I mean is the fact that, how can I put this? So, actually, you know what? Watch my video about immortalizing the soul. Inside that video, I mentioned how certain parts of the soul may kind of get destroyed, but not really destroyed. What I mean is the fact that, like, if your soul is attached to something which now I'm over here lagging and shit. What the fuck? If the soul gets attached to something which isn't of the spirit, yo, what the fuck's up with this lagging shit, bitch? Alright, let's try again. If the soul gets attached to something which isn't of the spirit, before that soul returns to the spirit, that part of the soul which isn't of the spirit kind of gets let go of. Now, the information is still there. You could still access those records and whatever the soul was attached to, but it doesn't. It's like the soul, so the information still exists, but the soul's not attached to it anymore. It kind of lets go of that. It just lets the information be separate from itself, and when it goes back to the province, it just contains it contains specific records and information, which that soul can still access. Whatever, like, let's say that the soul became a horrible person, right? The soul became evil, right? Because when you become evil, you just forgot your divine nature. So if the soul became evil, right, before that soul gets added back to the province, all that evil shit, you could say, gets destroyed, or it just gets let go of, right? And the soul can still choose to experience that if it wants to inside of its own province, but it's not stored inside the soul in the same way that the authentic aspects of the soul are stored. I think I explain this better when I make my video when I made the video about immortalizing the soul, and also the soul aspects video, because when it comes to soul or the soul fragments video, because inside that video, right, pretty much certain fragment, like when your soul returns, it can have certain fragments that still exist inside the astral, but once those fragments get healed, it's like they stop being evil anyway. And then now you have an aspect of the soul that was evil but then gets purified. So another more purified aspect is added to the kingdom and added to that soul's province. And it could still look at the evil parts, but it now it's like it's a story of how the evil parts got transformed. It's not just the soul was evil at one point. You know what I'm trying to say? So what I'm trying to say is, right, the parts that get cast off the soul, they usually become soul fragments that have to kind of get healed and purified, and then the purified version of that fragment gets added back to the kingdom and gets added to the province of the soul. And now when the soul accesses those records of it being evil, it always sees how it becomes purified. It's not just that the soul stayed evil and that there's some evil bastard inside the kingdom. That's not how it works, you know? So yeah. I think that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys understood that pretty well. I hope this video served you in whatever way it was meant to serve you. I'm gonna end this video right here. Like this video, subscribe if you're new. All my coaching is down below. There is also a very cheap $10 Patreon down below. If you see the option to hype up this video, I'm gonna end it right here. I love you. I'm gonna catch you. Peace.